Okay, so I usually don't record my Q&As, but I am recording this one because some people said that they wanted the recording. And I also assume people aren't going to be asking like really private questions. Just quick reminder about the parameters here. So when I say, Pesach theme is the name of the game. I will, be happy to try to answer any questions except halacha l'maisa. And I just want to be clear on what I mean by halacha l'maisa. So I'm going to give you 3 examples, okay, 2 of which are acceptable, 1 of which I will not answer. If you ask the question like, why do we do karpas? That's totally fine, okay? If you even said, why is it that some people use potatoes for karpas? I'm fine with that also. But if you ask, my family uses potatoes, is that okay? I'm not going to answer that question. I'm going to say, ask your posek, okay? So questions about halacha, like, like I can, I'm fine answering as long as it's not like practical. And also just note that, I'm far more familiar with the halachos having to do with the mitzvos of the Seder than I am with the halachos about chametz, because when it comes to anything having to do with chametz, then I just ask my posek. So like, I'm not fluent in that and would have to research it. Okay. So a couple of you sent me questions ahead of time, but I guess what we'll do, probably best thing is open the floor to questions. And then like when there's a lull, then I'll go to the questions that were sent in ahead of time. What do you got?
I have a question. It's more philosophical, but you know how there's this idea that we're supposed to be much more makpid about halachot for Pesach than we are normally during the year. And people who aren't usually machmir or following chumrah, oftentimes follow more chumrah for Pesach.
Yeah.
I've always wondered the different reasons why. Like I've heard one reason, but I was curious if there were more.
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me just see if I can find the thing that you're referring to. I mean, I know the thing you're referring to, but I want to look for a specific source. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Actually, is this gonna be doable? Give me 1 second. So I don't know if you had a specific source in mind, but there's a famous Mishnah Brura where he says basically that like in general, if someone is doing something baseless, then like, you can point it out that like they're doing something baseless. And the idea is to like this is the wrong volume. Okay, I'm not going to find it here. And the idea is that they should change it. But when it comes to Pesach, then even if someone is doing something that is there's baseless, then you shouldn't criticize it or like make fun of it or anything like that. And like you let them be strict. Is that the type of idea? I don't know if that's a specific source, but yeah. Okay, so I'm going to actually tackle that question and a question that Tamar sent me simultaneously, which is about Tamar was asking about kitnios, and if there's any if in light of the shir I gave about Durabanans, if like my views on kitnios have what light that sheds on the view on kitnios. Or did you want to read your question tomorrow? Or you want to say the question you had there?
I think that was basically my question.
Okay.
I like that question.
What was that, Esty?
I like that question.
Yeah. So I can't. So I here's what I wanted. I'm gonna answer tomorrow's question first, and then from that get an answer to Maya's question. So there is an Aruch HaShulchan in Siman Tuf Nun Gimel, and for those who know me, I like getting my halachah from the Aruch HaShulchan because he gives you all the sources and stuff. He's nice. So I just want to read the 2 places where he explains kitnios, and then just so you can see his attitude about it, and then we'll go from there. So he says, "V'da da'af demidina muter lechol orez v'chol mini kitnios b'Pesach." Oh, first of all, just basic definitions here, right? So chametz is a process that is a chemical process, but it is halachified, okay? That can only happen with the 5 types of grain. Okay, whatever you chita, saora, I can never remember all of them by memory, but hold on just a second here. Kusemes, Shifon, and Shibboleth Shual. That's what it is. Yeah. I didn't have to look it up. Right. So whatever you say that those grains are, and when they come in contact with water. So if you have those grains that come in contact with any like non-water liquid, then that's not halachically chametz, even if it acts like chametz. And then other grains like rice and corn and all this other stuff, even if it puffs up, is not chametz. Okay. So the Aruch HaShulchan says, even though from the law, it is mutter to eat rice and all types of kitnios, legumes, I guess you could say, on Pesach. That our rabbis and our fathers, our forefathers, have been accustomed for hundreds of years to not eat rice and types of kitnios of Pesach, because it's known that there are many types of granules of wheat that are found in them. Okay, and he goes on to explain the circumstances in which that happens, and then he says, oh, and by the way, just a side point here, I didn't learn this until like relatively late in my Jewish development. Do you know why it is that Ashkenazim took upon themselves kitnios and Sephardim did not?
I thought it had to do with the process of where things grew, like if they were next to each other, like certain fields were specifically planted next to each other.
Right.
I think it's the two of them would like mix at times.
Right. So I heard that also. And the way I heard it was basically that in the Ashkenazic lands, then you had multiple crops of multiple different types of things throughout the year, because I guess it rained more. So you would have like your silo where you would keep your wheat during the wheat harvest, and then like that would be replaced by legumes, like in a different season, and then by other types of things in a different season. So you were keeping the wheat in the same places where you were keeping your legumes. But in the Sephardic lands, they would only have enough for one harvest, and so they would store everything in separate areas. So just factually speaking, Sephardim never had this problem of keeping their grains with their chametz grains with their legumes, whereas Ashkenazim did. So the Aruch goes on and he says, the Isser Zeh, this prohibition, once our fathers accepted it upon ourselves as a geder, as a fence, midin Torah asr lanu levatel, then by Torah law, it is asr for us to negate. This kind of touches on the question that was asked during the rabbinic law shir, which I didn't answer, which is what's the status of minhagim now? And can minhagim now have the same status as the minhagim instituted by the Sanhedrin? So again, I'm not going into that, but he's saying that once they accepted it upon themselves, then to transgress this minhag would be a transgression of Torah law. Okay, so that's his stance. Okay, and those who are suspicious and who are lenient about this, testify about themselves that they have no fear of heaven and no fear of sin, and they have no expertise in the ways of Torah. Okay. And then he throws in this other point here. He brings a proof from the Yerushalmi, which I'm not going to go into depth here. I just want to bring one thing here. He says, "V'hini maybe raya brura laminhag zeh Yerushalmi." There's a clear proof for this minhag from the Talmud Yerushalmi in Perakol Shah. Tine Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri chulek ve'omer de'orez min dagan hu. So Rabbi Yochanan held that orez, that rice, was a type of wheat. Okay, it's possible orez might mean millet. I'm not sure. V'chayavin al chimutz kares, and you're chayav on its chametz, your chayav kares for if it becomes chametz. Mishum desvir le degam kemach orez bali de chimutz, because he holds that orez can also become chametz. V'rabanan savri de'eno bali de chimutz ela de sirchon, and the rabbis held that orez cannot become chametz; it can only become sirchon, which means it spoils. Uparach Yerushalmi, and the Yerushalmi says asked v'vadkena. Test it, see what happens. Klomar, nase isim orez v'nivdak im bali de chimutz oli de sirchon. Test it to see if this rice comes into becomes chametz, or if it rots. Umetaret, and the Gemara answers al ikar bidikasa hein cholkin, says they were disagreeing about the experiment itself. Okay, which is hard because I know we say that there's no factual machloksim. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri savar shabitkuha umatzuha shabali de chimutz. Rabbi Yochanan tested it and found that it became chametz. Rabbanan savar shabitkuha umatzuha she'ena bali de chimutz, and the Rabbanan tested it and said it did not become chametz. Okay, so it sounds like there's a machlokas on like what they were observing. I don't know how that can happen, but the Aruch HaShulchan says v'hashta kal v'chomer hadvarim. So he says now we can make a kal v'chomer. Di'im b'gedolei hatanaim nafal machlokas b'davar she'achush meid alav. If among the greatest tanaim you can have a machlokas on something that you can observe with the senses, ze omer kain meid hachush v'ze omer hafech. This one says that empirically I saw it, and this one says empirically I saw it. Kal v'chomer ben benoshal kal v'chomer. Then you got a grandbaby kal v'chomer. Shestam b'nei adam alfei alafim katane hadas shiyuchlu l'tos b'zeh. All the more so people can make mistakes about this. and say that this also can become chametz. V'im kol zeh hitiru chachamim, and nevertheless the chachamim permitted it. V'im kain, and if so, hu hadin b'min tuah zo o zo shidamu ze lezeh. If this is true, then certainly types of grain which are similar to each other. This is a huge proof for our rabbis who made this decree about kitnios. And they knew why they made the decree. And if there are countries that don't have this chumrah, the stringency, then all these countries of Germany and France and Russia and Poland, Kimu v'kiblu alehem v'alzarim hachumra hatova halaz halazo. They and their offspring accepted this chumra upon themselves. Sheishba tam ke'ikar, which has a reason that is essential. Uporitz gedu yishachenu nachash, and if you break a fence, a snake will bite you. That's a quote from Koheles. Ach befirush kiblu she'im ula yihi shnas batzoras chas v'chalila, but they also accepted upon themselves that if there were a year of famine, shehanim ra'evim lalachem, where the poor people are hungry for bread, az kol chachmei ha'ir uverosham mara da'asra matirim lacho kitnios b'pesach zeh. So then all the heads of the cities and the posek of the locale would permit them to eat kitnios on that Pesach. V'ata shnis rabba tepuhi adama gam zeh ein hechrech kiyadua. And now that eating potatoes has become common, then there's no need for applying this to potatoes. Okay, so hold on a second. I read that because I thought that he was going to get to this point that I've heard quoted in his name. So I'll just say it outright. I guess this is not the parak. So he holds that the reason why this is a good minhag is because since this is an Isser Kares, then for Klal Yisrael to be machmir on something that is an Isser Kares is a good minhag. In other words, even if it's a very, very remote chance that you're actually going to get kares for this, caring about not getting kares is something that is halakhically valid as a basis for the minhag, and we want to promote that. And that is my answer to Maya's question, which is that, in general, when you're dealing with other isurim, derabanan or even deraisa, then we would not necessarily advocate someone keeping something that has no basis. But for a Jew to be concerned about kares, about their soul getting cut off, that's something that's valid, and we want to promote that, either halakhically or like ethically, philosophically. So that's my answer to Maya's question. But then regarding Tamar's question about like the status of kitnios nowadays, it seems like according to Aruch Shulchan, like this has the full force of minhag, where it's asur midoraisa, and I don't know what the mechanisms are of that. But it's that's all I got on that. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your questions. I'll if there's more details, I'll try to answer those. But that's what I got on the kitnios thing and on the chumras in general.
Can I ask a follow-up to Maya's question?
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying that this idea is really not specific to Pesach, but it's a general statement about things that are chayav kares?
So I am saying that is the core idea about being machmir on things with kares. I don't know if there are other cases where there's a minhag that develops around an isser kares. I just don't know if there are any, because in fact, there are very few things that are chayav kares that minhagim could develop around. Let's say like most of the things that are chayav kares are like things that already have durabanans. Let's say like violating Shabbos, like doing malacha on Shabbos, or let's say like eating on Yom Kippur. You're really not going to have a issue of being lenient unless it's for kanas nefashos, for danger, in which case that's a different chumrah that's worthy to be machmir on. And then other stuff is like the arayos, which I don't know of any, chiyuvei kares minhagim, so yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, next question.
I have another question that's kind of related to chumrah.
Okay,
I know.
Can I say one more thing on that point?
Sure.
Sorry, the last point I was making. I think another thing that's just important to keep in mind is, this always trips me up until I remember it, is that that chametz is never batal, as opposed to things like kashrus. Right. There's just no amount of chametz that's batal. So it's not like you wouldn't do this with regard to kashrus, because there are halachic, like lines where after that it's not a problem anymore, and that's just actually happen with chametz. Okay,
that's a good point. And then let me just qualify what I said before in light of that, is that chametz is an isser kares, okay, and it's not batal. Now you're only chayav kares if you eat a kazayis of chametz. Now, so no one is actually going, like, not no one. It's going to be very hard to unless you like really set out to do it, to actually get kares from eating chametz. But it's being machmir on the phenomenon of the isser kares, plus the fact that there is a real chashash, there's a real, worry that if a grain of chametz was mixed into something, that it's not going to be batal. Same thing with avodah zara is also not batal. We don't encounter that much, but it's a similar thing. Yeah, thanks for adding that. Yeah, Maya.
It was just related to this idea of chumrah on Pesach.
Sure.
I know there's a common practice to not eat gebrot, which is chametz that touches water or any liquid. But then I know the people who hold that.
You mean matzah that touches water?
Sorry, that's what I meant. Yeah. Thank you. But anyone that holds that chumrah won't keep it on the last day if they keep a second day outside of Eretz Yisrael. Right. So my question is, in general, is that how we can view chumrah? That there are times when we can keep it, times when we can't. I feel like that's usually not how chumrah is viewed. And I know that they're showing it to. I know that they're doing it to show that it's a chumrah and not the halacha, right? Necessarily, but yeah. So
that's something that I've never understood why they do that. I've had that question as well. I'll tell you what my assumption has been, but I also I also don't know if this has any basis, what I'm about to say. So my understanding is, I know I just said that the Mishnah Berurah says you shouldn't make fun of minhagim and stuff, but our yeshiva is a brisker yeshiva, and a lot of our minhagim follow the Soloveitchiks. So my understanding is that Rav Chaim Soloveitchik would davka dip his matzah in soup to show that gebrux has absolutely no basis in halacha. And the reason why he holds it has no basis is because after something already becomes baked into bread, it cannot become chametz. And although people with gebrux say that there's a chashash, that there's a worry that there is a pocket of unbaked dough or unbaked flour, I should say, that came into contact with water that is lurking in the matzah. If that is a valid concern, that was only a concern back when matzahs were thick. Okay, and if you want an interesting article, by the way, on the history of thick matzah, this is a great article in Hakira with a fun title. Hold on. Yeah, the thick and thin history, the thick and thin of the history of matzah. Okay, which talks about like how matzahs evolved, and I don't remember the dates because I haven't read this recently, but once Ashkenazim started having cracker matzah, it is literally impossible for there to be, for that to become chametz. So Rav Chaim Soloveitchik held that was an absolutely baseless minhag. He wouldn't eat matzah dipped in soup on the nights of Pesach at the Seder, because there's a separate halacha that you can't eat matzah ashira, which is matzah that is made with other liquids and stuff. So given that, what I'm wondering is that it could be that you're right, that an actual chumrah you're not going to relinquish just because it's the last day of Pesach. In fact, there are many things where we davka, don't differentiate on Yom Tov Sheni from Yom Tov Rishon, because we don't want to disrespect the Yom Tov. And if you make any differentiation between the days, then you're disrespecting the Yom Tov. So it could be, and again, this is just total my speculation here, that it is recognized on some level that gebrux doesn't have an actual basis, but we're also not going to shock people by undoing it, and therefore it's not subject to the same standards as other chumras, and that we don't keep it, that people who keep gebrux don't keep it on the last day to show that it really doesn't have any actual basis. That again, it still seems to me like a contradictory, hypocritical position, because either do it or don't do it. But I am aware that there are these things where on Pesach, we know that people are doing stuff that's ridiculous, but we don't stop them from doing it, So it might be in that weird category.
I have a counterpoint.
Sure.
Yes, for those of us who only eat shmur matzah on Pesach, I believe that lifts on the last day.
So it's interesting. I've asked that question before and gotten the opposite answer.
Oh,
so
really?
I don't know if that changes.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's changed or not, but
I
asked a long time ago.
You probably asked after I did, so maybe
I don't know though. It's also possible I got a different answer. What do you say, Devorah?
Yeah, I know that don't poskin anything from a random story from my family, but I do have distinct memories of always getting to eat the bisli that's not shmur matzah on the last day.
Right.
So I think,
yeah.
I think that's what we do.
Funny. Yeah. Yep. And also, it could be that with the shmur matzah, there's a different a different issue because shmur matzah is not an issue of chametz, you know. So there, like, you know, you could say that the chumrah was initially right, but I'm saying it's not a chumrah on chametz, and there's a difference between, you know, with the gebraks, if the actual chumrah is because you're concerned about eating chametz, that's a much more severe thing than doing the Rambam shita of only eating shmur matzah throughout all of Pesach, you know, conceivably at least.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Next question.
I had a question just on one of the paragraphs, I guess, in Magid that we say, is from like Tefilah of the Avodah Zarah, like when we're talking about how like we were once idol worshippers. And the end of it kind of like, I was just kind of reading through Magid, and the end of it is just like, oh, like, okay, like God gave Yitzhak, and then he gave Yaakov and Esav, and it ends off with like to Esav he gave Har Seir to inherit, and then Yaakov and his sons went down to Egypt. So one, like, how is that portion of like Esav like relevant kind of? And then also like my second question is a little like tangential off that, I guess, that like I know we like so much of the Seder is based off of like, oh, like God took us out with a strong hand and outstretched arm and all of these things, but I feel like it's like at the same time we say like God took us in. So when we're being so grateful for like leaving, are we supposed to have the gratitude towards the process and how it changes us now, or is it specifically the end that we were brought out? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the first question I actually was going to look into this year. I haven't actually looked into it yet, but this is the part you're talking about, right? That it says, let's just read the sorry, I couldn't find my text of the Haggadah without these questions. I forgot how many of you, let's see, is Avital my only student? I don't think I was doing this when Devorah or when Tamara were in my class, but with the 100 questions on the Haggadah assignment, did you ever have that, Avital, with me? Yeah, 100 questions on Magi.
I had that. I had.
Oh, you did?
That.
Okay, so you must have been the first year that I did that. Okay, yeah. So this is when I would send them a version of Magi with 100 questions afterwards, after they came up with theirs. I couldn't find just the regular text. So in the beginning, our fathers were worshippers of Avodah Zarah. And now God, or Hamakom, however you wanted to find that based on my shir last night, which I didn't finish, has brought us close to his service. Shneimar, as it says, Yeshua said to the people, thus said Hashem, the God of Israel, on the other side of the river our forefathers dwelt from long time ago. Terach Avi Abraham, Terach the father of Abraham, Vavi Nachor, and the father of Nachor. V'yavdil himachirim, and they worshipped other gods. Ekach es avichem es Abraham Abraham Nahar, and I took your father Abraham from the other side of the river. Va'olach oso b'chol eretz Canaan. I brought him all around the land of Canaan. Va'arba es zaro v'eten lo es Yitzchak, and I multiplied his offspring, and I gave him Yitzchak. V'eten li Yitzchak es Yaakov es Esav, and I gave Yaakov. I gave Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Esav. V'eten Esav es Har Seir l'reshes oso, and I gave to Esav the Mount Seir to inherit it. Yaakov van of Yardu Mitzrayim, and Yaakov and his offspring went down to Mitzrayim. Right. So Avital's first question, Avital, is like, what are we emphasizing by talking about like this the Esav, what Esav got? Or,
and I was just like now it popped into my head. It's interesting that it mentions like Har Seir, and we get like in a way like Har Sinai. Like if you say that the purpose of Yetzias Mitzrayim was to get to Har Sinai, it's an interesting comparison of like,
that's interesting. Yeah,
mountains.
Yeah, that is interesting. I don't know the inheritance of Mount Seir. And like I don't know what that implication is in Tanakh. So that's part of what I have to look into. So I don't know the answer to this question. I can just let's. By the way, this, even though this is a Q&A, like we can like try working stuff out, as well. Although we are going to keep it moving. So halakhically, what function does this serve in the Haggadah? Because that might be a clue.
Probably like telling over the story of what happened, like kind of start to finish. So here's kind of
right. So it is in telling the story, but there's a more specific halacha in telling the story that this is a fulfillment of.
We start with Gnai and move to Shavach.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I'm just going to quote this from the Rambam because I forgot where this is in the what do you call, in the Gemara. Rambam is, so you have machloket. So the halakha is like this: we must start with degradation and end with praise. And then there's machlokas in the Gemara between Rav and Shmuel, okay, on what the degradation is, and then correspondingly what the praise is going to be. So here's how the Rambam codifies it as we paskin according to both of them, seemingly. Ketzad, how so? Maskil u'masaper shebetchila hayu avosinu b'mei terach u'milfanav kofrim v'toin achrei hevel v'rodfin avodah zara. We begin by telling about how in the beginning our fathers in the days of Terach and before him were deniers, okay, which in Rambam terms kofer in isolation, you assume it refers to a denier of God's existence, okay? V'toin achrei hahevel, and errors, okay, meaning people who err after nothingness, however you want to translate hevel, the rodfin avodah zara, and chased avodah zara. Umasayim, and we conclude b'das ha'emes, with the true religion, shekirvanu hakadosh baruch hu la, that God brought us close to it, v'hivdilanu min hatoim, and he separated us from those who stray, v'kirvanu li yichudo, and he brought us close to his oneness. And I always notice, by the way, that there is a chiasm here, okay, in let me just copy and paste this here. Hold on, just so you can see it in, oh, actually, I have a document here. So if you look here, kofrin means denying God's existence, which parallels Kirvanu li Yehudo, bringing us close to his oneness. Toin achrei hahevel, erring after nothingness, corresponds to separating us from those who stray. And then rodfin avodah zara being their religion, parallels Kirvanu hakadosh baruch hu to the dasa emes. That God brought us to the true religion. I forgot what to make of that, but it is interesting that he highlights these three things about our relationship to God, the fact that we err or stray, and then the religion that we were chasing after or being brought close to, So that is that's Rav Shita, and then Shmuel says, we also start by making known that we were slaves to Paro and Mitzrayim and all of the evil that Paro did to us. And we conclude with the miracles and wonders that were done for us and with our freedom. That is, we do this by expounding on the psukim from Arami Ovid Avi, Ad Sheyigmor Kol Parsha, until we finish the entire parsha. And the more we quantitatively and qualitatively expound on this parsha, then the better it is. So that's the function that this part of the Haggadah is serving. This is where we start with Rav Shita talking about like the beginning, our beginnings with Avodah Zarah. So that's not a full answer to Avital's question, but what I'm wondering is what happens when we read this pasuk about that Yoshua, this is Yoshua Sibur Yetzias Mitzrayim. Can we read that in light of this function here, like, because it's interesting that what do you call it? I mean, it's interesting that we quote the whole pasuk, right? Like, we don't always, do we quote the full pasuk anytime we quote a pasuk in the Haggadah? I feel like not. I feel like we quote partial pasukim. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Like, I always get the vibe that there are two routes that were taken by the by the children of Yitzchak, and it's highlighting that Esav went on to this glorious inheritance, and we went down to Mitzrayim, and then it, and then you end up throughout the whole story realizing that we ended up with something better than Esav had, because we ended up getting the Das HaEmes and this relationship with God, whereas Esav did not have that. And we're emphasizing that, in the beginning, if you just read this pasuk, it looks like, these guys got like the glory, Esav, and then we got like this, this Galus Mitzrayim, which was bad, but then you end up having like this great Shevach, but I don't really know at this point an answer. Yeah, Avital?
Also, sorry. Go ahead. So I was just going to say also, like, in terms of like going back to just interesting to look into the Har Seir is like that mountain. I don't know if we can I want to look into it, but like, I don't, if there's not really much said about it, it goes back to that same thing, that even if this is like the lowest like part of what Esav gets, like obviously it doesn't just come down to a mountain that they got, but like that we were so on the opposite extreme, even though we went through this whole Egypt process that might have looked really bad and negative, it ultimately ended up being really good.
Interesting. Yeah. That definitely requires a further verification, but yeah, I hear the vibe. Yeah. Esti?
Yeah, I was going to say, just based on a shir or a number of shirim that I've heard from Rabbi Chait, my understanding with that has always been that on Pesach, what we're really doing at the Seder is that like this, whereas Esav got Har Seir and other things like that, like in the material world as his Yerusha and his Pelek that he passed on from generation to generation, what we got was the system of Torah mitzvahs that began with the building of the nation that started when Yaakov went down to Mitzrayim. Like that was the beginning of our process of getting our Yerusha. And
okay, that's good. Yeah, so putting in terms of Yerusha.
Yeah, and if anyone's interested in notes about that specific pasuk, it's a little bit off topic, so I wouldn't say it. I have a really beautiful write-up about ideas of the Avos, and it has to do with that pasuk. So if anyone wants to send me your email to st.lifter, estee.lifter@gmail, I'd be happy to send it, but I'm not gonna. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, but Avital, I'll let you know if I find anything on this. Regarding your second question, just ask your second question again. I want to make sure I got it correct.
I think it was just in terms of like we go through this process where like a lot of the Seder is talking about how like we're so grateful for being out and that God took us out with an outstretched arm. But we also talk about how like God kind of put us in there. Like of course there was free will there in who went down, but the whole process seems to be one that was like God hand was like throughout the whole thing. So when we thank God for letting us out, are we thanking God for like the whole process? Like what should our mindset be in terms of what exactly are we being grateful for?
Okay, so I think that will depend on how you learn the brisbane of Asarim. You know, when Hashem told Avram Yado Teda ki ger yihi zarcha be'eretz lo lahem va'avadum v'ino osam arba'im shana, that your offspring are going to be a stranger in a land that's not theirs, and they will oppress them and enslave them for 400 years. The question is, and this is a fundamental machlokas, did that have to happen, or is it something that we got ourselves into in order to and it could have been another way? In other words, like and I don't want to say too much because this is part of the shir that I plan to give on Wednesday, which is I've been working on the Sforno about why God took us out of Mitzrayim, but there does seem to be a machlokas of, did the bad stuff in Mitzrayim have to happen? So you have some who hold that like Mitzrayim was the Kur HaBarzel, the crucible, and like we needed to go through this process in order to form us as a nation, and like experientially, whether you take a thing like I think Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs says this, and I think our YBT Rabbi Sachs says this, that we needed to witness what a society that is built around Avodah Zarah and the deification of man, we need to recognize what that looks like, because that is the entire thing that Judaism opposes. And it was and even though it was painful, we need to undergo that process. Or if you take another approach, the other approach is no, the stay in Mitzrayim could have been completely pleasant. And like you look at the way that Sefer Bereshis ends, Yosef and the Shvatim were at the upper levels of Egyptian society, and they were respected and loved and were able to keep the way of Avraham Avinu. And that could have continued throughout all the years of Mitzrayim until, like if you look at the brisbane of Asarim, it says why God had to wait this long in order to bring them back to Israel, is he says, V'dor Revi'i Yashuv V'hena, the fourth generation will come back here, Kilo Shalim Avon HaEmori Arata, because the punishment, here Avon means punishment, of the Amorite, it will not be complete until then. In other words, God couldn't kick out the Amorite until they deserved it. So Bnei Israel had to become a nation and wait somewhere. But that didn't have to be a bad thing. But however, since God knows what our free will decisions are going to be, and he knew that Klal Yisrael will become corrupt, then he told Abraham ahead of time that that's what's going to happen, that they're going to become enslaved and be afflicted, you know? So like, if it is the first way that God put us through this process in order to make us into the nation, a specific kind of nation, then we should even thank God about what we endured and about the redemption. But if this is something we kind of like did to ourselves and we were the cause of our own suffering, so then all the thanks to God really goes for the fact that he didn't abandon us and that he took us out and kept his promise to the Avos despite our straying from their path. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay,
Thank you.
there's a really good I bought the book a long time ago. I describe it more as a book than a Haggadah. This is from Rabbi David Foreman. I think it's called The Exodus That Could Have Been, where this is his big theory and he elaborates on it a lot, and that was a very good he does a very good job of expressing that second view, that the Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Galus Mitzrayim didn't have to be the way that it was. Yeah. Okay.
Hey,
next
who's that by?
Rabbi David Foreman. Let me just make sure if that's the title.
From like Aleph Beta?
Yeah, Aleph Beta, yeah. Sorry, the Exodus That Could Have Been. Oh, sorry. That was the name of his video series. The name of the book is The Exodus You Almost Passed Over. Yeah. While we're at it, by the way, just a small little commercial. If I had to recommend one Haggadah, and sorry, not one Haggadah, one Pesach book, which happens to be a Haggadah, it would be the Rabbi Jonathan Sachs Applebaum edition. So it's actually two books. This part is the collected essays on Pesach and is his essays. And then if you flip it around, the other half is his Haggadah and commentary. For whatever reason, the Haggadah commentary is okay. The essays are fantastic. Like I read them every year. I try to read all of them every year. And what's good about them is that I think you could give this to any person, any human being, and they would gain ideas from them. So it doesn't matter whether you are like, like I've given this to non-religious Jews before. I would even feel comfortable giving this to non-Jews, but he just has this universal way of presenting his ideas. That's part of his whole derech. That and the essays are fantastic. If you want to sample, the best essay, which I think I gave and shall have it, was Building a Society of Freedom. If you want a sample of it, I have it as a PDF. And then the second Haggadah, which I really like, is this one from the Rav called Exalted Evening. This one has philosophical ideas and also some halachic ideas, but it's just a good English Rav Haggadah. Those are the two that I would recommend the most, but the Rabbi Sachs one over this one, because I think the Rabbi Sachs one is just like appeals to everybody. So yeah.
Can I ask you about Haggadah quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Do you happen to know, I found in my, wait, let me take off my background. I found this Haggadah in my house that says for Soloveitchik, but I don't know. It's like written by, I guess, one of his students. Do you happen to know this?
I do have that one. Yeah. Rabbi Yosef Adler is, that's, I think that's the same Rabbi Adler whose book I just read. I have read that one. I think I got it more recently, so I don't remember how it compares to this one. I seem to recall this one being more accessible, but the ideas in that one also being good. Yeah, I just don't remember the particulars. It's in Seattle, so I'll probably end up taking a look at it again when I'm back, hopefully if I get back. Yeah. Okay, next question. Figa, you want me to ask one of yours?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so Figa's questions were, schools generally take teens out of the role of bincha and put them in the role of vihigadata by teaching divrei Torah. How do you feel about this development? Okay, and I think these are all related questions. I assume that's why you asked them to me. Beyond the Haggadah, is there anything we can do with it? I didn't realize this type of can do with our with our overall setup to appeal to teens, and then what can we do before Pesach to help make the Seder meaningful, right? So these are good practical questions, and it always used to be it used to pain me so much because I have experienced every Pesach, like pretty much every Pesach. Our family became religious, and I converted to Judaism in when I was in 11th grade. And so we didn't have any minhagim, and basically like we got to shape the Seder night culture of our family. And it's just the most joyous, like intellectually like sparkling like evening ever, and it's just so much fun and joyful. And whenever I talked to my high school students, I would get so many people who would just say that they hate the Seder and they hate Pesach, and it's so boring and so like they can't wait till it's over with. And I felt that so much of it is because they can't control their own Seder, and they're just kind of forced to do whatever their family does. So like in certain families, they just rush through everything, or they do everything in Hebrew, or like there's no discussion, or there's people just reading Divrei Torah like from packets, and it's a lifeless experience. And so the first reaction I had, Vega, to this question is like, I can answer this question in abstract, like if you had the opportunity, what could be done? But so many of these kids are going to face up against like what their families already have in place, and it's very, very hard to fight like family culture, So that is like a more like localized question, like how do I make the best Seder given what my family does? But regarding your question in abstract, I just want to remind you what the mitzvah is here. Okay, so the mitzvah, the way that the Rambam formulates this in the Sefer Mitzvos is, he says, this is mitzvah Kuf Nun Zayin, Hatzivui Shnitz Tavinu Lasaper B'Yitzias Mitzrayim B'Leil Tesvav B'Nisan B'Tchilas Halayla. So it is a commandment that we have been commanded with to tell of the Yitzias Mitzrayim, to tell the story of Yitzias Mitzrayim on the night of the 15th of Nisan, at the beginning of the night, Kafid Sachos Lashon HaMasaper, in accordance with the eloquence of the teller. Okay, that's literally what it means. Or Sachos Lashon is like eloquence or articulateness. The more you tell and go on at length in the matters in words about the greatness of what was done to us. Actually, I don't know if Asu Banu, I think that's done to us. Umash inu osanu hamitzrim, and how the Egyptians afflicted us. The nifra lanu Hashem mehem, and how God took our vengeance on our behalf from them. Ulahodos lo yisale, and to give thanks to God. Al hachesed asher gamalanu, on the chesed that He bestowed upon us. Harizeh meshubach, then the more praiseworthy you are, or it is. Kamosha amru, as it says, kol hamarech l'saper b'yitzias Mitzrayim harizeh meshubach. The more you tell the Yitzias Mitzrayim, then the more praiseworthy it is. So this point, I remember first hearing from Rabbi Chait, but I think this is echoed in the Ritva. It says it explicitly. Do I have a copy of the Ritva on me? It's going to be too difficult to find. The point is that Mida Oraisa, the mitzvah is to tell the story in your own way, according to your own understanding, based on who's there, what impacted you this year, and to make it personal. Like that's the actual biblical mitzvah. And then what happened is that, according to the Ritva at least, because not everyone is capable of doing it, and because there are halachos, like you have to be maskil b'gnus u'masayim b'sheva. You have to start and stop end the story in specific ways. And there's a whole seder of like, when you make the brachos and when you eat the things, and you have to give drashos on the psukim, and you have to like point to the objects and like talk about them. There's all these halachos. So Chazal at some point felt that the average person might not be able to coordinate the entire Seder on their own, and might not be capable of telling their own story. So that's where the Haggadah arose, which is like a backup script to be yotze all the main points, and then to like serve as prompts to talk about the story. I really want to find this Ritva because he says it outright. So I'll talk while I try to find it. So what I would suggest to Fega is, again, families notwithstanding, the more you can personalize it and encourage people to tell their own version of the story, to articulate what impacted them this year, then the better your Seder is going to be, and the more people will get involved. Like at our Seder, what we do is I think we do this after Halach Ma'anya or before Halach Ma'anya, right before Magid. We make this announcement. I read the Rambam's mitzvah, and I tell them what I'm telling you now. And I say that, like, if anybody at any point in the meal wants to share how Yitzias Mitzrayim and the event has impacted them this year, whether through Sipur, like telling the story, or some insight, or the Rambam also included here, Hallel and Hodah, if you want to give thanks and have a spontaneous outpouring of thanks to God for taking you out of Mitzrayim, for taking the Jews out of Mitzrayim and how this has impacted you, then the floor is open to you. And we encourage, we do this in our family, but whichever guests are there, they see us doing this, and many times they will do the same thing also. So again, easier said than done when you are controlling the Seder like I do, and I can like make this announcement. But if teenagers are able to do this on their own and to encourage their family to go along with it, then I think that'll make it much more meaningful for them and really for everybody. Okay, let me just see if I can find this, and then I'll take other questions on that matter. Okay, I'm not going to find it here because there are.
Can you give examples? I mean, I have some ideas of what.
Sure, yeah, go ahead, please do. Yeah, as long as you don't mind me looking while you're saying that.
Yeah, no, I'm just like thinking, like, are you saying like to talk about ways that Yetzias Mitzrayim really impacted what it means to be able to be Jewish and be able to avail ourselves of Torah mitzvos and avail ourselves of the different knowledge that we get through Nevuah, the Nevuahs Moshe, and the different things? Like, are you talking like all those things being part of what we express at the Seder? Is that what you're talking about?
You're asking me or you're asking Fega?
I'm asking you. You said to give examples of how Yetzias Mitzrayim impacted you. Is that what you mean?
I'll give two examples. I mean, like what I usually do is, every year I'm involved in some aspect of like some area of like learning about Yetzias Mitzrayim, and usually I try to find like something that will cut to a fundamental theme. And me being me, it usually is a theme that results in some insight that transforms my view of Torah or of life or of something like that. And so I express that at the Seder as my personal sipur. So like that's like my thing. But another type of example could be like, when Johnny went to well, hold on, I might have this here. Johnny's Egypt. Oh, that's it's going to be, hold on. 2018, 2019. Oh, this was your senior year, Avital.
Can I ask who Johnny is?
Johnny, oh, sorry, yes, Johnny's my brother, who was a world traveler. Yeah, so, oh man, hold on just 1 second here. Oh, here we go. Oh, I'm just going to read this because it's so good. Okay, so this was Johnny's personal Yetzias Mitzrayim that year. So this is when he was doing his first Africa trip. So he says, the whole day had been weird and a little stressful. It was my last day in Ethiopia and I hadn't really brought souvenirs. So I went to the souvenir district. And in one of the two times this happened this trip, some people attempted to pickpocket me. I'd been trying to figure out a reliable way to tell a taxi how to get to the Chabad house since the streets were unmarked and some of them were blocked. And later on wondering, okay, fine, I'm not going to read this part. Okay, fine. Then he says like this. Okay, so he says, so he is flying in the plane. And he says, and he was he says, okay, at the time I was having a lot of trouble writing about Ethiopia, which had me pretty frustrated. Then after giving up on that, I watched this really bad Chinese movie on the plane that somehow did hit a strong emotional tone, despite being bad, which had me trying to figure out writing wise and also put me in a strange introspective mood. Okay, so that was the state of things when I realized it was already a little past sunrise and I should probably daven Shachris now since it would be too late by the time I got to my hotel. I got out my phone with my Siddur app and had the flight map on the screen. The other parts of my mood that had lingered, the other part of my mood that had lingered, and I think this is pretty common in situations like this, was an oddly powerful sense of Jewish identity from spending time at the Addis Chabad house in Ethiopia. When you're in that foreign of a place connecting to the few people who share your values and way of life, it takes on a specialness that is absent when you're surrounded by it. It felt special to randomly be arguing about Yichud Hashem, God's oneness, with someone in a gated off refuge for Jewish travelers on an unmarked road in this undeveloped African country. Then I was on a plane and it suddenly was time to daven, so I was davening. I was the only person on this with this way of life on the plane and barely any at all in the country I was flying over. I was saying Birchos Shema while looking at the flight map with the plane icon flying over the old Egyptian capital of Thebes, and a shock of emotions went through me. This was Egypt. This was the same Egypt. This was where humanity at large first encountered these ideas. Saying the Shema, declaring Yichud Hashem as a lone Jew on a plane over Egypt, doing it just because it was the time to do it, that idea had made it all the way here to this point in time. How important must this idea be that it made it this far? How vital must this mission be that we engage in through the mitzvah system, that we've marched it out of ancient times so far in the past that they're practically mythological, 3,000 years past. The temples and shrines that remain from that time are buried in the sand. Every element of that culture is wiped out gone. Every idea they held in any esteem has been destroyed and forgotten, left to die. And here I am declaring this idea in its same form, its precise wording, its precise meaning, identical how it was first expressed in the same place 3,000 years ago. How powerfully important must all this be? That was the thought that kept pulsing in my head. It actually moved me to tears. It goes without saying that to study an idea and recognize intellectually how important it is to you and also to humanity is much different than experiencing stark evidence of its importance. I had never viewed the system from that perspective, and it was so sudden, such a drastic change from rote, drowsy daily davening to a firsthand confrontation with the eternality of the entire system. It was seeing the 3,000-year journey. This in front of me was where it started, and this is where it is now in an instant. Wow, I'm being moved to tears also. Yeah, sorry. Whoa, that's powerful. Okay, afterwards, I remember amusedly thinking, okay, that's why I came to Egypt. That was what I wanted. If anything else happens while I'm here, okay, that's fine too. Whatever, I won't complain. I got my money's worth. The plane hasn't even landed, but still. I think there was more to the emotion I felt, but I didn't probe too much because I was worried that I would corrupt and transform it by trying to confine it with definition. But what I described was what I got out of it, trying my best to articulate it during and after. And then I just got to append one more hold on a second, comment to this. Someone commented on Facebook, and then Johnny added a good thing here. So Johnny said that it was so ironic experiencing how much effort went into building these monuments and colossi that would bring immortality to Egypt's ideas and culture, compared to us with absolutely zero monuments, basically zero ruins, artifacts, relics, etc. All of our energy put towards a non-physical legacy that might not have satisfied the immortality fantasy emotionally, but did a far better job fulfilling it. Even the ideas we do know of the Egypt of that time are inert and basically museum pieces. They may have lasted a long time, but aren't immortal because they died with the culture. You know, so that was Johnny. So the year that Johnny traveled there, that was his personal, Sifur Yetzias Mitzrayim. And the reason why I'm reading that in contrast to mine is because, it can emerge from your learning, but it can emerge from your life, or it can emerge from a clash of your life and your learning, or a harmony of your life and your learning. And the goal is to try to create space for the people, you and the people in your Seder, to be able to express it, I remember last year, it was the first Pesach after the pandemic, and then the year before was the pandemic. And I remember both Sedarim, I remember expressing, we all remember the Pesach of the pandemic, of literally being in a plague outside, and I remember the ideas being associated with that. So the more you can personalize it, and then the better, the more meaningful it will be, and the more you're actually fulfilling the mitzvah, and the problem again is that people do these things by rote, and because we're in a culture of doing mitzvahs by rote, and you have to fight against that culture, as much as possible. Yeah. Is that piece that you just read from Johnny public? He's fine with me publicly sharing it. I think I don't think it's up anywhere publicly now. I can send it to you if you want, though. Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's amazing, right? I mean, you can't have that experience. That's not an experience you can fabricate. Yeah. Also, I remember his one with, I don't know, some girls that he met with who were gotten snake bites or something. Oh yeah, he has really crazy stories. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Oh, and this year, see, I'm looking forward to Johnny's Seder this year, because this year he went on his genocide tour, to Rwanda and to Turkey and then to Germany and Poland. So I think that there's going to be a lot of insights in terms of Avdus, and the slavery, so that's what I'm looking forward to about our Seder. Yeah. Okay. I hope that helps, Vega. Again, I feel it is a very individualistic question, in the sense that every teenager has to first of all, it's difficult enough for a teenager to personalize the story for themselves, because depending on how much they know about Torah or what resistances they have, they might not even be able to tap into that, on their own. And then to fight against the family culture, or to do it in a way that's not going to be perceived as fighting, that's also very difficult. So there's several uphill battles, Yeah.
And I would add, it doesn't even have to be that there's a culture that a person's going against. I mean, I feel like in our home, everyone's on board, but everybody's in a slightly different place every year in different ages. Right. It just makes it hard because we're just.
It does, yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, also, you know what? I want to do something else. I want to answer another question that Tamara sent me, in part because I think it's related to this. So Tamara said, oh yeah, I was wondering if there's a specific correct kavana that we're supposed to have when eating matzah and maror. It sounds that way from Rambam Gamliel's 3 statements in the end of Magid, but when I'm eating matzah, should I be focusing specifically on the haste of the Jews leaving Mitzrayim and not on any other ideas about the matzah that I've learned? Regardless of the answer to that question, I'd also like to learn those 3 ideas more thoroughly. On a superficial level, the aspects of the Pesach story that are being highlighted there feel a bit random, like they're almost too specific somehow. So this is also another fun game that I like to play in my learning, which is, the 3 themes of Pesach, if you're going to boil them down to 3 themes, are going to be embodied by Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. So each year I find myself gravitating towards one of those themes and focusing on that in my learning. Now, what I used to do is I used to have try to get ideas in the time leading up to Pesach and then have that kavana when I'm eating the matzah or the maror or whatever, But at a certain point, I started realizing that my relationship to the mitzvahs was better if I did all the learning, but then allowed for spontaneity when I eat when I do the mitzvah, and interesting things happen when you do that, where you do learn and consciously focus on these ideas, but then when you're eating the matzah, you just allow your thoughts and emotions to go wherever they go, because halachically you're yotze no matter what kavanah you have, and truthfully, in terms of the perfection you gain from the from the mitzvah, the perfection you gain from it is all of the discussion about it and all the learning about it leading up to it, and there are many years when I'm eating the matzah and I'm like, it is amazing that the act I'm doing right now has 0 value, okay, except maybe the carbs that I get, which is debatable whether that's a value or not, Yet, if I weren't obligated to do this act, I wouldn't have at all been thinking about the themes and ideas which have the real value. And it's because I'm doing this mitzvah, because God obligated me to do this physical action that has kept these ideas alive for these thousands of years. And I'm sitting here just munching on this thing, and it's just this, mitzvahs are amazing in that sense, that you would not gain anything from the act itself, but obligating you in the act is what leads to all these tremendous gains. And the gains happen before, during, and around it, but not in the act, So many times I find myself just munching on the matzah and letting that recognition wash over me that we say in the Seder, and brought us to this, what's the phrase? Lechol b'matzah umrorim. In the bracha at the end of Magid. Hold on, do I have the bracha in that thing? I often think about at the end of Magid. Blessed are you, Hashem, our God, King of the universe, who redeemed us and redeemed our fathers from Egypt. I often think of that when I say that line. They brought us here to be able to go munch, munch, munch. God brought us here to be able to do munch, 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 and it's not the act of eating, it's all the mitzvahs embodied in it. But at the end of the day, it's the mitzvah that engages us in all the mitzvah, that engages us in all the ideas.
Question?
Yeah,
I'm a little confused. I thought this was the one mitzvah all year that you actually have to have kavanah for.
I mean, I've never heard that. I've heard ideas stated from Rabbi Chait that this is the only time we explain the kavanah of the mitzvah as part of the what do you call the doing of the mitzvah. I mean, so the question is with Rambam Gamliel. He says, "Kol shlo omar shlosh dvarim elu b'Pesach lo yatsa yidei chavaso." Anyone who doesn't explain these 3 things on Pesach has not fulfilled his obligation. Pesach, matzah, and maror. So there's a machlokas rishonim between the Rambam and the Ramban, I believe, about whether Rambam holds. So the question is, which obligation are you not fulfilling? Rambam holds you're not fulfilling your obligation of sipur, of telling the story. Ramban holds that this is a component of Pesach and matzah and maror, meaning that if you don't explain matzah, then your Ma'aseh HaMitzvah is actually lacking. Now, the Ramban himself says it doesn't mean that you're not yotze. It just means that you're not yotze b'shlei musa, that you're not yotze fully. But even then, you have to verbalize it. I've never heard anyone say that if you don't have proper kavana like in terms of like knowing the ideas, then you're not yotze. I've just never heard that, and I would be hard pressed.
I don't know that I've heard that. Maybe what I heard was the other thing that you said. Okay.
Yeah, but it is an important point. I mean, this shows that the it is important that we do know the ideas associated with them. And so I'm not like minimizing tomorrow's question. I'm just saying, like, I think allowing for the spontaneity of whatever ideas to flood you from, it creates a better experience as opposed to like rehearsing like what I have in mind, But that's just me. Again, for years I did it the other way. I had specific ideas in mind. But regarding your specific question tomorrow, if you want ideas, so last year was a maror year for me. I gave shir on maror, and the and that's recorded, and I can send you the recording if you want. And I also, even though it was about maror, I do remember at the very end, Ayala Fader gave a theory of Pesach, Matzah, and maror that linked the three of them. And I remember really liking it, but I don't remember what it was. I think it was like in the last minute or a couple of minutes of this year. And I want to go back and listen to that again to figure out that idea. This year is going to be a Pesach year because I gave a shir on the Sforno on Korban Pesach earlier for our Friday series. And which I'd like to think about again this year. And then I'm also doing Hilchos Korban Pesach in my Rambam shir. So I have a feeling it's going to be a Pesach year. But, I find that, if you try to focus on all three, then you get the benefit of having all three. But like, if you go in depth really on one of them, it often does shed light on the other two. That's just my experience.
I'd be interested in those shirim if you're willing to send them to me.
Yeah, sure. Definitely. Just feel free to remind me if I forget right afterwards. Okay. Okay. Other questions? We got these. Oh, I should answer some of Lauren's questions. So Lauren couldn't be here today, but she's going to listen to the recording. So she said, Arami Obed Avi, maybe going through the different interpretations and determining why the Haggadah singles out Lavan. How was he worse than Paro? I know it's a question people ask a lot, but it would be interesting to think about it by looking at the Psukim and Devarim and comparing them to Breshis. Now, happens to be, I've been working on this with two of my Chavrusas for the last 2 weeks, and I want to give shir on this next Friday, if the ideas come together, okay? So that's what I'm gonna try to do. I wanna show you a resource in case you don't know about the resource. So again, beautiful Ala Torah you go to alatorah.org, go to Sidur B'Haggadah, click on Iyunim B'Haggadah, and they have, just like you do with every Parsha, first of all, they have the Ala Torah Seder Companion, okay? And this is also good for Fega's thing, by the way. The Ala Torah Seder Companion is, I don't know if they're going to produce a new one this year. It just has like tons of stuff to think about to accompany your Seder, okay? So that's like great, okay? But then you can go through and they have topics. So let's say, for example, let's just go to Lauren's question. Arami Oved Avi, Devarim versus Shemot. And you have here the English essay, right? Which introduces the question, which is why we use Arami Oved Avi as the text. Then you click on approaches. And like all Torah does, it summarizes all the approaches to why we do this. And then you click on, let's say, this first approach is by the Abravanel and David Zvi Hoffman. You click on Abravanel, it gives you the first-hand source on the right there. You click on David Zvi Hoffman, it gives you that source, and it summarizes everything. So you can like get the quick way of getting the ideas, or you could like learn it on your own, And there are just tons and tons of Haggadah topics to explore here, so that's just a great resource. So that was Lauren's first question. Skip the second one for 1 second. She says, I really enjoyed your Chumash exploration shir from last week, delving into why Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. Maybe we could expand upon that more and talk more about destiny versus fate as it relates to Hashem saving us. Did the Jews do tshuva, or was Hashem going to save us anyways? So that relates to the thing I told Avital that I plan to give shir on Wednesday, which is part 2 of my question about why did God take us out of Mitzrayim. So hopefully that'll come together also. Okay, now Korban Pesach, how can we relate to it today when it's been so long since we celebrated it? What ideas about the Korban Pesach should we be thinking about when we mention it at the Seder? So hopefully I'll come to new ideas this year, but I'll tell you something that has been really good in the past. And this is a good question you can pose to your table, okay? Okay, first of all, what is the main, what are you under the impression is the main idea of the Korban Pesach? Like what's the main theme or the main idea? And there's not one right answer.
I've always heard about it in the context of like It was something that we did, first of all, that was totally against Egyptian like society, because they really believed in like that being their gods. And also the fact that you had to share it with a certain amount of people, that it united the Jews as communities and as like people together.
Right. Okay, good. So that's also been my I do want to hear other people's stuff, but this is the one I was going to talk about, so I'm going to talk about it now, is the that basically, you know, the problem with the Jews in Mitzrayim was that they were virtually indistinguishable from the Egyptians. And even after seeing many of the Makos, then the Jews were still on the fence, you know? So God gave them 2 mitzvos, Pesach and Milah, to be, to differentiate themselves from the Egyptians. And it was an ultimate test about, am I going to buy into the Egyptian system of Avodah Zarah and slavery and the masters, or am I going to believe in Hashem and the God of the Avos? Yeah, Fega, you have something right now, or should I finish what I'm saying?
Yeah, so I have a question on that.
Okay, sure.
So I've heard opposing ideas that the Jews were the same, but also then like there's Rashi about how the names and the clothing and like all remain separate and they didn't intermarry. So I'm just wondering how the two balance out.
So I was just talking about that with my chavrusas. This is actually one of the things in the Haggadah of Klal in the drashos of Rami Ovid Avi. I'm going to answer this because this is relevant to the Korban Pesach thing. It is on Mitsuyanim Sham that the Jews were distinctive there. Yeah, Gadol, no. Vayhi Sham Lagoy, they became there a nation. Malamed Shahayu Yisrael Mitsuyanim Sham. This taught that the Jews were distinct there. So there's actually a bunch of different versions of this about what did the Jews keep. So names, clothing, I've heard hairstyles, you know, like other things like that. So I don't know which of the Mefarshim says this, or maybe this is an original idea, but my Chavrusa and I both recalled hearing this idea that it's not that the Jews are being praised here, that they were so dedicated to Hashem that they kept these things. It's exactly the opposite, that the only things they kept that made them distinct were their names and their clothing and like their hairstyles. In other words, they had totally assimilated, and were it not for those like external cultural facets, they would not even be distinguishable as their own nation. It was that bad. So that's like how I would interpret it in light of this Korban Pesach idea. And you look at Jews now, like secular Jews now, you know, there are many secular Jews that like, what's their connection to Judaism? Their last name. Like that's it, you know. And some Jews change their last names, you know. So like it's like the last vestige. So going back to the Korban Pesach, so like you know, why was this the test? Because they took the god of Egypt, one of the gods of Egypt, you know, represented by the lamb or the goat. They you know, according to the psukim, had to tie it to the bedpost 5 days prior, which is why we call it Shabbos HaGadol, right? We call Shabbos before Pesach Shabbos HaGadol because on that year, the Yetzias Mitzrayim was on Thursday. And so that year, Shabbos was 5 days before. So the Jews took it on Shabbos. And the Egyptians were seeing that this holy animal was taken and tied to the bedpost. And then what did the Jews have to do? Is they had to publicly slaughter it, roast it whole, okay, to keep its image intact, and then spread its blood on the doorposts, and then make a sandwich and then eat it. So it's the ultimate act of blasphemy against the Egyptian god and desecration of their like holy animals. And it was the ultimate in your face to their masters. And if you were an Egyptian Jew, you would have this tremendous fear that if I kill this animal, then the god will strike me down. Or if I disrespect this animal, then my Egyptian taskmaster will come after me, you know? And so the Jews who refused to do the Korban Pesach for that reason demonstrated by their refusal to do it that they were Egyptians. And the Jews who made the Bechira decision to go ahead and take this symbol of Egypt and do this act that they were so afraid of, and that they took so much security in, and instead put their security in Hashem, they showed that they were worthy of being part of the Bris Bein Habasarim and being taken out as people who followed in Abraham's way, you know? So that's like an idea of the Korban Pesach. But the question is, how do we make it relevant today? So a question I've posed at my Seder before is, what would the Korban Pesach be today? You know, or what would your personal Korban Pesach be? Now, I think this has been an easier question to answer in other times in history. So for example, like, imagine being a Jew in a heavily Christian country, okay? And then, the nativity scenes that they have out in front of churches at Christmas of like the baby Jesus and stuff. Imagine taking like a baby Jesus, walking out into the middle of like, a whole like town square full of Christians, and then just bashing it on the ground. And then, like, I don't know, making a sandwich out of it and eating it, like imagine what you would like feel upon doing that, and how much courage and conviction in your belief system you would have in order to be able to do that. Or let's take another thing, like, what do people take security in now and feel like this is really the thing keeping me safe? I think for a lot of people, it is it's money, So imagine like if you took, what if the God told you, okay, take all your money out of the bank in bills, in $100 bills, and then burn it. And if you do that, then I'll make you wealthy. How many people would actually be able to do that? Now, I'm not saying that money is avodah zarah. I'm saying like, what does our society revolve around such that if God designed a test that tested whether we're going to have allegiance to the values of Judaism or the values of the surrounding culture, and we had to like act on it, what would that test be? And I find it's very interesting, like if you pose the question in this way, and then like, you get different responses around the table, So I would say that that's another way to connect Korban Pesach to us. But again, I'm working on this year, so hopefully we come up with something. And I feel like we got some ideas with the Sforno shear earlier in the year. Do we answer all these questions? I think so. Okay, I'm fine to go for a little while longer, but I don't want to hold you over. If there are any other questions, I'll hear them. Or if someone has to go, then I'll take their questions first.
I'm just really curious to hear what your take is on the I don't know if we fully directly addressed the first question of mine, but it was about how
yes, correct.
Yeah. So
sorry.
You mentioned you mentioned that you did that you had 100 questions on the Haggadah, and I'm just really curious to hear your perspective and just really anything about this.
Yes, sure. So I think reading Divrei Torah at the Seder might not be the best approach. I think the intent behind it is good, but I just don't think anyone at the Seder wants to hear Divrei Torah being read. I think much better is organic discussion. Like that's really how the Seder is designed to be. And halakhically, when we say the Haggadah to Bincha, I mean Bincha is really your young son. And there are all these halachos designed to prompt. The father is supposed to prompt the natural curiosity of the child, and they're supposed to ask these spontaneous questions. But then nowadays, from what I understand, kids are like given packets and they have to read at the Seder, and it's like a bastardization of the whole process. It's supposed to be a night of exploration and curiosity. So my approach in educating high schoolers was to try to facilitate that, and the way I did it was giving them this assignment of you have to come up with 100 questions on Magid. And I said, usually this was in 10th grade. And I would say like, you don't have to come up with all of them on your own. You can talk to people, do this with like a parent or a sibling or whatever, as long as you give credit where credit is due. You can get the questions from books, as long as you cite your source. And universally, every year I did this, I would get 2 reactions. One was when I gave the assignment, I would get people complaining and saying it's impossible and saying like, there's no way we could do 100 questions. And then after the assignment, they would all, and especially after Pesach, they would all be like ecstatic and say like, I had more questions than anyone at the Seder, and like people at the Seder were impressed by my questions. And what this did by coming up with this ridiculous number of 100 questions, which I got, by the way, from the Abravanel's Haggadah, because he comes up with 100 questions. That's his style, but by 100 questions, it made them really be like scrutinize the text, and really push themselves to come up with questions that they wouldn't ordinarily come up with. And by arming them with questions and encouraging them to ask the questions at the Seder, or not even encouraging them. I know there were kids who did not want to be involved in the Seder, but were forced to sit there. And then when someone gave a Devar Torah that like was exposed to a question that they themselves had written, then they would ask this question and like it would lead to this discussion, So it was trying to encourage this like spontaneity. And this like personalization of it, and this organic quests for understanding, and that, I'd say like that's really what you should try to foster in in the students, whether in the role of bincha, of being the one to ask questions, or in the role of higarta, of like personalizing your understanding of the story. And in other cases, I had suggested to students to be provocative, like I had this great Seder that I led. It was great. Not saying, oh, I did a great job, but like, my dad's siblings are all non-religious. And there was this year, it was my second year of yeshiva, when we went to some hotel in Florida, and I knew that my dad's non-religious brothers would be there with their kids. And one of them was like, it was funny, like they were all like they were the Ben Russia, the Ben Tom, and the Eno de Elishal, So the Ben Russia was one who was like anti-religious and prone to conspiracy theories. The Ben Tom was someone who was curious, but just was not very intellectually sophisticated. And then there was the Eno de Elishal, who just like was not engaged, So I designed the Seder around those three people, and I would say things deliberately to like provoke the Russia and to like lead on the Ben Tom, So if you know your audience and you can like say stuff that will like, engage them or get a rise out of them, then that could like make it more fun and enjoyable. And I may or may not have encouraged that sort of rebelliousness in certain students in my youth. Yeah.
May I ask, like, as in, I think that would definitely get reactions, like provoking and
Yeah.
like provoke, but I'm also wondering like how shalom bias fits in, like in like as in once the question is asked, you don't know where the conversation can go.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, what I'm going to say, and I'm saying this like, with an awareness that reality doesn't always correspond to ideals. The ideal is that, like the Gemara says, when a Talmud and a Rebbe are learning, then they become enemies. And when they're done, then they become friends, meaning that when you're learning with your Rebbe, you should attack your Rebbe like he's the greatest apikoros in the world, right? And same thing with children and parents, but it has to be done in a spirit where afterwards, it's done in a spirit where people will recognize that this isn't personal, that we can have these discussions, and then no one's going to take it personally. No one's going to be insulted. So I would say that that's like that's where the shalom bayis should come in. In other words, don't try to force shalom in the discussion itself. But if you see that the discussion is going to break a shalom afterwards, so then it's not worth engaging in the discussion. So I know those are like just guidelines. It's hard to like legislate particulars, but yeah, like, if it's a healthy environment, look, there are some parents who cannot tolerate being questioned by their kids or like being shown that they're wrong, or anything like that. And it's going to be very hard for a teenager to like maneuver in that situation. Yeah. All right. Anything else before we wrap it up?
I have a different question that's related to what you said about the Korban Pesach.
Sure.
So, okay, it's a little bit vague though. So this is something I've been thinking about ever since Rabbi Pesach gave a shir about Kiddush Hashem, which had to do, I guess it made me think about the idea of being a Jewish person in a secular environment and
right.
Conforming or not conforming to standards that are set around you that have to do with beliefs, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know how to like phrase this question in a specific way, but I guess I was wondering, like, I think you were talking about like money as a form of modern security, but I think there also are modern morals and moral ideals that some of which maybe are or are not compatible with Torah ideals. Right.
Yeah.
So,
which is probably that example, I think, is more related to the Korban Pesach. I think that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. So, see, I don't even want to be specific on the recording, so I feel like maybe I'm already.
I can pause the recording.
Okay. Yeah.
Let me pause the recording.